Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, Saudi-led coalition forces have decided to end their month-long bombing campaign in Yemen. We'll tell you the latest from the region on tonight's broadcast. A former bookkeeper of Auschwitz has described in court today of the grisly killings he had witnessed at the death camps as a 21-year-old SS guard. We got the latest on that trial out of Germany. Former Prime Minister Sir John Majors has warned a minority Labour government in the UK propped up by the SNPs would be a recipe for mayhem. We have the report from the ITV's James Miggs tonight. In international business news, the U.S. wants to extradite a futures trader in the UK in relation to alleged fraud offenses. We got that story. And Jon Karl grills BS artist and White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest in the D.C. news. We have all those stories and more, plus Corey Evans.
Thank you, Jay. We have an update on the migrant boat situation in the Mediterranean, and this one is in over its head. Sarnia flipped the bird at a camera as he bombed the Boston Marathon? Why am I not surprised? Target's latest deals are missing the bullseye on the issue of supply and demand. The owners of the Wrigley rooftop are stirring up a mighty wind in lawsuits across America. And Jay, get ready for a Full House reboot in entertainment. That's all coming up in today's Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source, starting now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Tuesday, April the 21st, 2015. I'm Jason Miller, along with Corey Evan this evening, and what I can say is, it may not be summer yet, but it was a beautiful day out here in Southern California today. We hope you all enjoyed the beautiful day wherever it might be, despite what the weather might be over on the East Coast and in the Midwest today.
Well, at least we got some cloud cover here. That's a little bit of a relief just before summer, and hopefully it dumps some rain on us.
Absolutely. Your international weather coming up later in the broadcast with the BBC's Met Office's Chris Fox. As always, we thank the BBC for providing weather forecast for us. All right, folks, we got a lot of news to get to tonight, so let's get right to it on tonight's broadcast. And we start off in Yemen tonight, where Saudi... I beg your pardon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, got to hit that button right there. Saudi-led coalition forces have ended their month-long bombing campaign in Yemen. It was announced earlier today. The alliance has achieved its military goals in Yemen through the Storms of Resolve campaign and will bring a new operation called Restoring Hope, a statement read on the Saudi-owned Arabia TV. The mission, the statement said, would focus on security at home and counterterrorism aid and a political solution in Yemen. Yesterday, Saudi-led forces that pounded the Iranian allied Houthi rebels for more than 3 weeks caused a massive explosion when it targeted a weapons warehouse in Sana'a. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has said today that the presence of a large convoy of Iranian cargo ships in the Arabian Sea was the factor in the U.S.'s decision yesterday to deploy additional warships in the waters off the war-torn Yemen, but was not the primary reason for the move. Army Colonel Steve Warren said a Pentagon spokesman also said he did not believe Navy warships patrolling the region had been in direct contact with the Iranian flotilla of 9 cargo ships. Warren dismissed reports that the carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt and the cruiser USS Normandy had been deployed to the region to intercept Iranian ships carrying arms to Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, as it was reported yesterday. Fighting forces loyal to the U.S.-backed Yemeni president have that story as we reported yesterday, was not confirmed when it was reported yesterday, at least by the Associated Press, who originally put out the report. Many have asked whether or not the U.S. warships are there because of the Iranian ship convoy or the flotilla that is also in the area, Warren said. That is certainly one of the factors. That is not the reason they are there, though, he said. He said the United States did not know what the Iranian cargo ships were carrying and declined to say whether U.S. warships would stop and board Iranian vessels if they attempted to enter Yemeni territorial waters. I'm not going to telegraph anything, Warren said. Warren said the U.S. warships were there in the Gulf of Aden because of the deteriorating situation in Yemen and the need to ensure freedom of navigation throughout the zone, which is vital to oil shipping. Asked how the Houthis could pose a threat to the maritime security when they do not have a navy, Warren pointed to the country of Libya, where a rising conflict has prompted refugees to pack aboard boats that later capsized in the Mediterranean. More with that with Corey Evan in just a minute. It's difficult to predict the future, so what we need to have are options, Warren said. We have to pressure and to create options for ourselves should the deteriorating security situation get to a point that maritime security is threatened. And now we send it over to Corey Evan. He has more on that maritime trouble as immigrants are trying to come over into Europe. He has more on that boat sinking over the coast of Italy. Corey, tell us more.
Jay, Italian prosecutors have accused the Tunisian captain of a boat carrying migrants of ramming a merchant ship coming to its rescue, causing the death of hundreds of migrants when his vessel capsized. This according to ITV News. Mohammed Ali Malek was arrested on suspicion of multiple homicide. Only 28 survivors have been brought to Italy from the hundreds of mainly African and Bangladeshi migrants on board. The UN's Migration Agency said that this year's death toll in the Mediterranean could be 10 times worse than in 2014 and top 30,000. That's what I mean to say. The UN Refugee Agency today urged European leaders to put the protection of migrants at the center of debate over the crisis in the Mediterranean and to do more to help Greece and Italy cope. After as many as 900 people drowned in the ship off the coast of Libya this weekend, EU ministers on Monday called an extraordinary summit for Thursday and made an action plan. More than 36,000 have tried to cross the Mediterranean this year, the UNHCR says, mostly from Libya, and nearly 1,800 are feared to have died in the attempt. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees welcomed the plan as a good start, but noted its emphasis on law enforcement. Stay with us here at the Evan Miller Report. We will keep an eye on the situation in the Mediterranean and bring you details as they come up to the surface. Next up from Euronews.com, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sent a ritual offering on Tuesday to a Tokyo shrine for war dead, irking Asian neighbors just before he hopes to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of a leaders' summit in Jakarta. Abe made the offering, a potted tree, a day before a group of lawmakers paid their respects at the Yasukuni Shrine. The timing was seen as an attempt to avoid diplomatic embarrassment during Wednesday's summit. Abe told reporters prior to leaving for the Asian-African Conference that he hoped he and Xi could meet, adding, quote, "I would like to improve ties with China further based on the principle of a mutually beneficial strategic relationship." A Japanese government source said Abe would express remorse over World War II in remarks on Wednesday, but media have said he would not emulate his predecessor, Junichiro Koizumi, who repeated a landmark apology at the same conference in 2005. Sino-Japanese ties have chilled in recent years due to feuds over Japan's wartime history, bitter memories of which persist in China, as well as territorial rows and mutual mistrust over Abe's border security policies and China's military assertiveness. The Yomiuri Shimbun Daily said a final decision by China on a meeting between the leaders of the world's second and third biggest economies depended on Abe's remarks. China said Xi's schedule at the summit had yet to be decided and called on Tokyo to acknowledge the past. South Korea, which also sees the shrine as a symbol of Japan's past militarism, expressed irritation at Abe's offering. Abe's offering at Yasukuni Shrine, where leaders convicted as war criminals by an allied tribunal are honored with war dead, treads a fine line between demands of conservative allies to visit the shrine in person and a desire to keep a thaw in ties with Beijing and Seoul on track. On Wednesday, scores of ruling party lawmakers are expected to visit the shrine. Abe will make a high-profile speech to a joint session of the U.S. Congress next week, the first by a Japanese leader. Both the Jakarta remarks and the U.S. speech will provide hints about a statement Abe plans to make in August to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Abe reiterated on Monday that he would uphold a landmark 1995 apology by then-Premier Tomichi Murayama, but he said he saw no reason to repeat the same phrases, which include a heartfelt apology. Now we go on to U.S. news, if Jay is ready. We're not ready. Okay. When I get to U.S. news, we will have the latest out of the Tsarnaev trial, including a photo that was never before released that apparently has Tsarnaev given the bird to a camera as he bombed the Boston Marathon. But in the meantime, I toss it back to Jay.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you very much. The former bookkeeper of Auschwitz described in court today the grisly killings he had witnessed at the death camp as a 21-year-old SS guard working as a clerk. Oskar Groening, now 93, told the Lundberg court he had witnessed in 1942 Jews being herded into a converted farmhouse near the camp. An officer shut the door, put on a gas mask, opened a can, and poured its contents down a hatch, he said. The screams became louder and more desperate, but after a short time they became quieter again, Groening said. This is the only time I participate in a gassing, he added before correcting himself. I don't mean participate, I mean observed. He also said on his first day he witnessed a SS colleague grabbing a crying baby and slamming its head against a truck until it was quiet. I was so shaken, Groening said, adding that at the time he told his superior, quote, I don't find what he did good at all. He asked the commander for a transfer from Auschwitz after that. Although not directly responsible for the killing of anyone at the death camp, he is being charged for being an accessory to at least 300,000 Jews who were sent to the gas chambers between May and July 1944, according to the current indictment. Yeah, oh no, indeed. Very sad story. All right, on to British politics now. In the latest off the UK election, former Prime Minister Sir John Major has warned a minority Labour government propped up by SNP votes would be a receipt for mayhem. And as the ITV's James Mates reports tonight, in a speech in the Midlands today, Sir John said it would be a weak and unstable administration which would wreak havoc among Britain's economic recovery. Here is James's report.
The Conservative Party's elder statesman, the last, 23 years ago now, to have won a majority in Parliament. So Sir John Major's first intervention in this campaign was always going to be important. And it turned out controversial.
This is a recipe for mayhem. At the very moment that our country needs a strong and stable government, we risk a weak and unstable one.
One of his own former cabinet colleagues has warned the Tory strategy of demonising the SNP may end up threatening the union. But Sir John would have none of it.
Sir John, there is a sustained attempt already to delegitimise a Ed Miliband SNP government. Do you think the United Kingdom can survive such an effort to delegitimise what would be the choice of the people of the United Kingdom?
I wonder how many people here are voting to have the SNP running our government. I'd like to know what someone who isn't even a candidate for the House of Commons is doing, talking about her party changing the policy and politics of the government of the whole of the United Kingdom. That's what's delegitimising.
The person he was talking about, SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon, was swift and robust in her rebuttal.
My message to John Major is that Scotland's voice deserves to be heard in whatever way the Scottish people choose to make their voice heard, and voting SNP means that Scotland's voice will be heard more loudly and strongly than it's ever been heard at Westminster before.
But perhaps the greatest service that Sir John Major here in the Midlands has done for David Cameron is to keep the headlines for another day on an issue of the Conservatives' choosing, one that they believe is playing very well for them in this campaign.
And on the stump in Yorkshire today, David Cameron wasn't letting up.
An endless process of negotiation and haggling and ransom and, frankly, blackmail.
But there is still as yet no sign of it making a significant difference in the polls. James Mates, ITV News.
Thanks to James Mates for that update on the UK elections. And stay with the Evan Miller Report and the SHR Media Network. We'll bring you the British UK elections coming up on May the 7th of this year, so stay tuned. Finally, before we wrap up UK election politics, the Conservative Party chairman Grant Shapps has become involved in a row over claims that he was behind changes made to the Wikipedia pages of his political rivals. The Guardian newspaper in the UK is reporting that the online encyclopedia has blocked a user's accounts on suspicion that was being used by Mr. Shapps or someone acting on his behalf to edit his own page and entries about his conservative rivals and other political opponents. Wikipedia claims the changes made by user Contrabisc, also include the removal of embarrassing references on Shapps' page about the Tory chairman's business ventures under the name of Michael Green, a millionaire web marketer. An investigation carried out by The Guardian claims to have found that about a third of the edits made by the Contrabisc account were on Shapps' own page, while the rest were made up largely of apparently unflattering changes to senior political figures in the Conservative Party, such as Philip Hammond, Justine Greening, and Lynton Crosby. The company insists that sock puppetry, creating a fake online identity for an improper purpose or to mislead others, is not permitted under Wikipedia's guidelines. When asked about these allegations by ITV News, the Conservative Party issued the following statement to ITN. This Guardian smear is categorically false and defamatory. It is untrue from start to finish and was quite likely dreamt up by the Labour's press office. Sadly, it is typical of the smears coming from those who would rather not debate policy and substance, end of quote. In the wake of the initial allegations, the Liberal Democrat press office released a tongue-in-cheek press statement poking fun at Mr. Shapps and his alleged connection to the Contrabisc usernames. The document concluded with notes to the editor's postscript saying this press release has been edited by Wikipedia user Contrabisc. And final note out of Brent before I send it over to Corey Evan for the national news here in the U.S. A futures trader has been arrested in the UK in relation to alleged fraud offenses during the flash crash of 2010. Naverd Sagir Saharo, 37, from Hansglow in the UK was arrested today on suspicion of U.S. wire fraud, commodities fraud, and manipulation charges. The U.S. Department of Justice has said the United States has requested his extradition, the department added. The 20-minute flash crash in New York saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunge nearly 700 points back on May the 6th of 2010 before sharply rebounding. It has been said to cost people millions, if not trillions, of dollars in loss of stock options. Some people have made money on the deal as well. More to come as this story develops. And now we send it over to Corey Evan. He has today's National News Brief.
Thank you, Jay. In a photo never before made public and taken just before his 2013 arraignment for the Boston Marathon bombings, a 19-year-old Dzhokhar Tsarnaev stands in a federal courtroom holding cell, looking directly into the surveillance camera and defiantly flashing his long, thin middle finger. This from the LA Times. Prosecutors used the startling image Tuesday at the start of the penalty phase of Tsarnaev's capital murder trial to convince jurors that the Russian immigrant remains defiant and unremorseful and should pay with his life for the April 2013 bombings. They contrasted the image of an angry Tsarnaev with family portraits of the four who died in the bombing and subsequent manhunt, all of them smiling, including 8-year-old Martin Richard. Many in the crowded Boston courtroom were visibly moved by the dueling images, exactly the reason the government had hoped for in keeping the Tsarnaev photo under wraps these last 2 years. Quote, "This is Dokar Tsarnaev," announced Assistant U.S. Attorney Nadine Pellegrini, unveiling the July 10, 2013 picture in which he wears a bright orange jail jumpsuit. "Unconcerned, unrepentant, and unchanged. Without remorse, he remains untouched by the grief and the loss he caused," unquote. She turned back to the jury and said, "The United States will ask you to return the just and appropriate sentence for Dokar Tsarnaev of death." The panel of 7 women and 5 men earlier this month convicted Tsarnaev of all 30 counts against him. 3 people were killed and more than 260 injured at the marathon, and an MIT officer was shot to death days later as the brothers tried to flee. In this second and final phase of the trial, the jury must decide whether he dies in an execution chamber or receives life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yeah, you can tell I'm not a fan of the latter, but at any rate, U.S. District Judge George O'Toole told the jurors that the decision was theirs alone, but he added that a death sentence must be unanimous and come only after jurors conclude that the aggravating factors in Tsarnaev's crimes outweigh any mitigating factors the defense brings up, such as his troubled relationship with his older brother Tamerlan. The defense contends that Tamerlan, who was killed during an attempt to capture him, was the bombing mastermind. The government's expected to wrap up its case by the end of the week, with the defense likely starting Monday. Pellegrini urged the jury to ignore defense claims that Tsarnaev was afraid of his older brother and merely followed his lead in the bomb plot. She also asked the jury not to be swayed by defense claims that Tsarnaev was the product of a broken family. Yeah. Just because you're from a broken family doesn't mean you have to go and bomb one of the biggest marathons in the world and kill and injure as many people as he did. You can't justify a sin. I'm sorry. You just can't. Moving on, speaking of trying to justify sins, Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of an American bishop who pled guilty to failing to report a priest who was a suspected child abuser. This from the Daily Mail. Bishop Robert Finn offered his resignation under the Code of Canon Law that allows bishops to resign early for illness or for some grave reason that makes them unfit for office. But children's rights advocates are urging Pope Francis to do much more to deal with clergy who become embroiled in child sex scandals. Finn, who leads the Diocese of Kansas City St. Joseph in Missouri, got into trouble after he waited 6 months before notifying police about the Reverend Sean Radigan. Radigan had a computer containing hundreds of lewd photos of young girls taken in and around churches where he worked. He was eventually sentenced to 50 years in prison after... Yeah, he deserved to be sentenced to 50 years in prison after pleading guilty to child porn charges.
He got 150 years.
I don't think he would have lived that long, but I get your point. Finn pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge of failure to report suspected abuse and was sentenced to 2 years probation in 2012. It's made him the highest-ranking church official in the U.S. to be convicted of failing to take action in response to abuse allegations. Since then, he's faced constant pressure from local Roman Catholics to step down, with some parishioners petitioning. Despite a catalog of child sex cases within the Catholic Church, far no U.S. bishop has been forcibly removed for covering up guilty clergy. Anne Barrett Doyle, co-director of the online abuse resource bishopaccountability.org, said while Finn's resignation was a welcome step, more has to be done. She's called on Francis to publicly state that he was removed from mismanaging the case and failing to protect children. She noted that bishops had been allowed to resign under the previous 2 popes, but that the Vatican has never publicly linked their resignations to mishandling abuse cases. Meanwhile, U.S. victims group SNAP praised Finn's resignation as a tiny but belated step forward. Yeah, a bit small, but hopefully this will lead to more accountability being brought forward. Fingers crossed. And toes. When we come back from this break, Greeks, Russians, and Target shoppers are getting a roughing up in my business report. You'll understand what I just said when we do the business report, of course. In lawsuits across America, the owners of a swanky bit of are ready to play ball. Today's entertainment report has Jay shouting, "Oh, Bob Saget!" There you go. You missed your cue before, but you found it this time. Anyway, what do you got for us?
Well, Corey, Tuesday ABC News is John Karl, White House Press Secretary and BS artist Josh Earnest on concerning remarks made by former Secretary of State and current 2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. will air those remarks here on the Evan Miller Report in the D.C. news. Also tonight, the State Department confirms its network was hacked after all. And an embattled DEA head is reportedly ready to resign as Loretta Lynch gets her vote in the Senate. All those stories and more on the SHR Media Network's Evan Miller Report. We'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
Talk news. Talk news.
Radio.
Talk news. Talk news.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
There are more than 3 million children in America's child protective and justice systems. Kids who've been abused, neglected, or traumatized. Kids who have begun to act out. The worst situations you can imagine. They've been told repeatedly they're worthless, messed up, or written off completely as a lost cause. For their safety and others, some of these children have to be removed from their homes, separated from their families. They're at the mercy of an overwhelmed system. Every 38 minutes, another troubled child is referred to youth villages. Youth Villages believes that no child is a lost cause, not a single one, because a stable, loving family can help any child succeed. And we have an 80% overall success rate that proves doing whatever it takes for children is the only thing that works. If you agree, find out how you can help at youthvillages.org.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It's the closing bell, so here comes your business report on the Evan Miller Report. I'm Corey Evan. Jason Miller will be back with the DC news, and I've got a little bit of DC news as well in just a few short moments. But first, the Dow lost 85 points today at 17,949. The S&P 500 lost 3 points at 2097. And the NASDAQ, they went against the grain and picked up 19 points at 5014. The dollar was little changed Tuesday from its levels a day earlier as worries about Greece appeared to recede. Nonetheless, the greenback is still about 2.3% above its mid-March year-to-date low against the euro, according to MarketWatch. The euro was worth $1.07 and hundredths of a cent in afternoon trade after a volatile session. It was worth at one point in afternoon trade in New York Monday $1.07 and 39 hundredths of a cent. Small margin, but a margin nonetheless. The dollar reversed gains against the euro from earlier in the trading day that followed a Bloomberg report that the ECB was considering reining in support for Greece. Greece could soon default on its sovereign debt pushed the euro lower against its rivals, including the dollar, on Monday. Analysts attributed the dollar's moves to a sell-off in U.S. Treasury, saying that no market-moving economic data had been released. Mike O'Rourke, chief market strategist at Jones Trading, said there was no particular piece of news or data driving the dollar's retreat, but that the move was likely nothing meaningful. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note retracted earlier declines to trade at 1.912%, up 1.5 basis points on the day. The dollar edged higher against the yen at 119.64 compared with 119.26 on Monday. Meanwhile, the pound rose to $1.49 compared with $1.49 and 29 parts of a p compared with $1.49 and 2 parts of a p Monday. Earlier on, the dollar strengthened against the euro on reports that the ECB is studying measures to restrict emergency funding for Greek banks under its Emergency Liquidity Assistance Program, known as the ELA, which Bloomberg reported today. Russia is paying a hefty price for supporting the breakup of Ukraine, $106 billion to be precise. This from CNN Money. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev gave the first official estimate of the cost in a speech Tuesday. He said the decision to annex Crimea had sparked a crisis that turned out to be more difficult than even the most pessimistic expectations. Western sanctions imposed over Crimea and Moscow's support for separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine had cost Russia $26.7 billion in 2014. This year, the cost could balloon to $80 billion, he said. The latest trade statistics show just how bad the situation has become. The value of Russians' foreign trade slumped 30% in the first 2 months of the year. Russia's trade with its biggest partner, the EU, fell by more than a third. Moscow retaliated against European and U.S. sanctions by banning most Western food imports. Overall, imports fell 40% in January and February, but the move has backfired, pushing inflation up to nearly 17% in March, the highest rate in 13 years. Western sanctions left Russia even more vulnerable to last year's halfway plunge in oil prices. Russia relies on oil and gas exports for roughly half of its government revenue, and the value of its energy exports dropped by 40% in the first 2 months of 2013, and the government has already been forced to slash spending. Counter soaring inflation, Russian interest rates have shot up to painful levels, and Russia's GDP is expected as much as 5% in 2015. In short, they shot themselves in the foot. Yeah. And speaking of Jay off-air just... Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what he said off-air. Sorry, I just have to bring that up sometimes. I just feel it's airworthy here.
Sometimes never hurts when you're doing bad business news in a business report. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you see what I'm trying to do here, folks. I'm trying to keep you awake. But at any rate, moving on to U.S. business, Target shoppers found out this weekend that when stores make deals to carry merchandise from high-end designers for a limited time, it can be, well, really limiting. This from the Christian Science Monitor. The discounter partnered with the Lilly Pulitzer brand to carry a collection of 250 pieces for a fraction of the price of the Palm Beach designer's original merchandise. But the offer, which included a $38 pink shift dress and a $25 beach towel, was wrought with long lines in stores, quick sellouts online, and other problems. It shows the challenges stores face when they offer limited time collections. These lines typically consist of cheaper versions of designer pieces and are sold for a short period of time. They generate buzz from aspirational buyers who want to don upscale brands as well as avid wearers of the themselves. But it can be a double-edged sword. Often, customers encounter picked-over merchandise and website snafus. And, of course, Target pioneered these partnerships in the 90s, and they've been followed by rivals like H&M, Gap, and Kohl's, believe it or not. They had to take the site offline for 20 minutes because demand was so heavy, and that made social media buzz with anger. Ultimately, the items sold out online within a few hours, and at many of the 1,800 stores within half an hour. That's quick.
Why'd you turn off that website? Why'd you turn it off? My wife wanted that dress. I'm just ticked off. Where's that dress? I want it now.
Well, Jay, here's the problem with all that sort of stuff. Sometimes it's hard to predict demand because stores and analysts say it's hard to gauge what shoppers will actually buy because those items had never been sold before. And, of course, social media can hurt. Shoppers are increasingly turning to social media to vent. They drummed up so much hype at Target around its collection of upscale Italian designer Missoni in 2011 that its website actually crashed and ended up shutting down for most of the day of the launch. And, of course, the shoppers voiced their frustrations online and then threatened to boycott Target weeks later on social media because their online orders were being delayed and canceled. And some shoppers use these partnerships to profit by selling stuff on eBay. For instance, there were sold-out Lilly Pulitzer items selling for at least 3 times Target's original prices on eBay. Yeah, that's upsetting right there to hear that someone's gone to the trouble of making a discount version of their items only to find them inflated to full price on eBay. But I'm sure Meg Whitman, that's what her name is saying, oh yeah, money in my pocket. Because she, of course, found it.
Rich fat cat with that nice little pension she's getting. Yeah.
Yes, and before I wrap up business,
California politician in this broadcast, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, but Corey Evan is making a point, and I can't question that. Meg Whitman did used to run eBay. That is a true fact. I can't go against that.
And of course, Meg Whitman can afford all the ice cream that she can eat. But I'm not sure she should eat this ice cream. Bluebell, according to Health Day News, said yesterday, that it will pull all of its frozen dessert products off the market because they might be contaminated with a bacteria that can cause stomach illness. So far, tainted ice cream made by Bluebell has been linked to 10 illnesses, including 3 deaths in Kansas, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. New tests have revealed that half gallons of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream produced on 2 dates in March contained Listeria monocytogenes, according to the Brenham, Texas-based company. And if you happen to buy any of those ice creams, among other brands, it turns out that the Listeria contamination was more widespread than they originally anticipated, so they've pulled all their products off the market and they're going to have to produce replacements, which is going to take a while. In the meantime, if you bought any of it, if you've not gotten a stomach ache and you've already eaten all your ice cream, you shouldn't worry about it. But if you get a stomach ache after eating that ice cream, you should see a doctor. But otherwise, don't take the chance. Get on the phone and call 866-608-3940 Monday through Friday. That's their consumer information line. Otherwise, just take the ice cream back to the market and get a refund on it. Again, if you have questions, you can call 866-608. That's what I got for business, and let's just say today's not a good day for ice cream anyway, so I won't be going for any.
No, certainly not. And if Corey Evan can send me all that information on that ice cream recall, we will post that up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report, for our audience who buys that ice cream. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before I get over to the D.C. news regarding Jon Karl pressing White House Press Secretary and BS artist Josh Earnest, it's not often that I send it to Corey, who has a D.C. story today.
Yeah, actually, I've got one for you folks. This from the AP. The traditional presidential campaign may be getting a dramatic makeover in Jeb Bush's bid for the White House as he prepares to turn some of the campaign's central functions over to a separate political organization that can raise unlimited amounts of money. The concept in development for months as the former Florida governor has raised tens of millions of dollars for his Right to Rise super PAC would endow that organization not just with advertising on Bush's behalf, but with many of the duties typically conducted by a campaign. Should Bush move ahead of as his team intends, it is possible that for the first time a super PAC created to support a single candidate would spend more than the candidate's campaign itself, at least through the primaries. Some of Bush's donors believe that to be more likely. The architects of the plan believe the super PAC's ability to legally raise unlimited amounts of money outweighs its primary disadvantage that it cannot legally coordinate its actions with Bush or his would-be campaign staff. The exact design of the strategy remains fluid as Bush approaches an announcement of his intention to run for the 2016 Republican nomination, but at its center is the idea of placing Right to Rise in charge of the brunt of the biggest expense of electing Bush, TV ads and direct mail. The campaign itself would still handle those things that require Bush's direct involvement, such as candidate travel, and it also would still pay for advertising, conduct polling, and collect voter data. But the goal is for the campaign to be a streamlined operation that, quote, frees Bush to spend less time than in past campaigns raising money and as much time as possible meeting voters. Bush's plans were described to the AP by 2 Republicans and several Bush donors familiar with the plan who spoke on condition of anonymity because the former Florida governor has not yet announced his candidacy. Bush spokeswoman Christy Campbell said, quote, any speculation on how a potential campaign would be structured if he were to move forward is premature at this time. Bush plans to update about 300 of the group's most generous donors at a meeting in Miami Beach on Sunday and Monday. The strategy aims to take maximum advantage of the new world of campaign finance created by a pair of 2010 Supreme Court decisions and counts on the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, to remain a passive regulator with little willingness to confront those pushing the envelope of the law. One reason Bush aides are comfortable with the strategy is because Mike Murphy, Bush's longtime political confidant, would probably run the super PAC once Bush enters the race. Meanwhile, David Kochel, a former top advisor to Mitt Romney's campaigns and an ally of Bush's senior advisor Sally Bradshaw, would probably be the pick to lead Bush's official campaign. For Bush, the potential benefits are enormous. Campaigns can raise only $2,700 a donor for the primary and $2,700 for the general election. But super PACs are able to raise unlimited cash from individuals, corporations, and groups such as labor unions. In short, Jay, they can raise as much as possible to support a candidate that supports the rotten core.
Absolutely. Well said there, Corey Evan, with the new news from the Jeb Common Core Bush campaign tonight. Thanks so much for that. Moving on to the Democratic side, on Tuesday, this from Pundit and Press, our affiliate, ABC News' John Carl pressed White House Press Secretary and BS artist Josh Earnest concerning remarks made by former Secretary of State and 2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton that small business creation has stalled out in the U.S. under President Obama. Clinton made the remarks yesterday during a campaign event in New Hampshire. Here's those remarks, first starting with Josh Earnest asking the question about her remarks.
And if I can turn to an entirely different subject quickly, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, you may have heard, is in New Hampshire, and she had made a comment about the economy. I wanted to get your reaction to this. Regarding small business creation, she says that small business creation has stalled out. She was surprised to learn this, stalled out in the United States. Does the White House agree with Hillary Clinton's analysis of the state of the economy regarding small businesses?
I didn't see the entirety of her remarks, but I can tell you that the President certainly believes that there is more that we can do here in Washington to put in place policies that will further strengthen job creation in our economy, and whether that is important investments in rebuilding our infrastructure. The President believes that we can make some common sense investments in infrastructure by merely closing some loopholes that only benefit the wealthy and well-connected. By making smart investments in infrastructure, we can create jobs right away. Many of those jobs would be created with small businesses all across the country. And we would also see a long-term economic benefit associated with a modern, upgraded critical infrastructure in this country. So,
do you agree with Hillary Clinton that under President Barack Obama, small business creation has stalled out in the United States?
I'm not sure that's a direct quote. I suspect that it's not. But I would, the president has...
She used the phrase stalled out. Small business creation has stalled out. Do you agree that it has stalled out?
The president himself has said many times that there are additional important steps that could be taken by Washington, D.C., where members of Congress no longer serve as an impediment to forward economic momentum, but actually that they can support it.
That's not my question, though. I just asked, do you agree that small business creation has stalled out in the United States?
Again, I didn't see the entirety of her remarks.
Forget what she said. Has small business creation stalled out in the United States?
We'll take a look at the statistics and get back to you.
Okay.
All right, and you know what? I don't often say this of the national networks, ladies and gentlemen, but way to go on Jon Karl in putting the BS artist, as he is, Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, in his place today. Not able to answer the question. If you're not able to answer the question, well, the question looks like it's going to be yes on this one. Yes, the economy is stalling. Yes, it is stalled. That means President Obama's economic plan has stalled. It means it's not working. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll be the highlight of President Obama's presidency right there, that little clip, which will be in the National Archives forever to come. Sometimes I just enjoy doing my job, and that last one right there made sure I enjoyed my job today. All right, folks, moving on to the rest of the day's D.C. news today. The Inspector General of the State Department, Stephen Linick, testified on Capitol Hill today that the State Department network was indeed hacked. U.S. Senator David Perdue asked, "Do you have evidence that the State Department's network has been attacked, and does that affect you guys?" Linick responded, quote, "There is evidence that it has been attacked and it has affected us. I can't really go into the details because of the nature of the information. Georginians sent me to Washington to make federal government more effective, transparent, and accountable. Today's hearing is part of our congressional oversight authority. It is my hope that this first hearing and bipartisan work of this subcommittee will help uncover ways we can improve and streamline oversight at the State Department in order the men and women who serve our country at home and around the world." The Office of the Inspector General was designed to prevent waste and fraud and abuse, and has laudably found ways to save millions of taxpayer dollars. However, they do not have autonomy or independence to conduct adequate oversight. And Senator Perdue went on to say that Mr. Linick and his team are not given full authority to hold the Department of 72,000 employees accountable. As chairman of the subcommittee, my goal is to improve the overall operation effectiveness at the State Department and provides greater transparency and accountability for the American people, Perdue said after the hearing. More on this full article will be up later on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. And moving on in other D.C. news that we'll headline just briefly today, Michelle Leinhart is expected to resign her position as head of the Drug Enforcement Administration soon, after the AP reported just 5 days after the bipartisan House Oversight and Government Reform Committee issued a rare statement of no confidence in Leinhart's ability to properly lead the DEA. Last week, Leinhart testified before the committee on the findings of a recent report that revealed widespread sexual misconduct and corruption by DEA agents, as well as the agency's failure to properly investigate and discipline such behavior. The statement from the House committee came in response to Leinhart's claim that government employees' protections made it difficult to fire agents and restricted her ability to reprimand. Committee members on both sides of the aisle were frustrated by her apparent indifference, as she put it into email to employees, the disgraceful conduct of a few individuals several years ago. After over a decade of serving in the top leadership position at the DEA, Administrative Leinhart has been woefully unable to change or positively influence the persuasive good old boy culture that still exists throughout the agency, the committee's statement declared. It continued to say, from her testimony, it's clear that she lacks the authority and it will make tough decisions required to hold those accountable who compromise national security and bring disgrace to their position. End of quote. And end of story, I should note. Loretta Lynch will finally get a Senate vote this week on her nomination to be Attorney General 5.5 months after President Obama chose her to succeed outgoing Attorney General and BS artist Eric Holder. The long-delayed vote will come after Senate leaders struck a deal on completely unrelated anti-trafficking legislation and as Republicans faced mounting pressure from within their own ranks to confirm her. While her eventual approval had been expected, Lynch had become entangled in the Senate's partisan ringer when BS artist and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refused to call a vote until Democrats relented on abortion language in an otherwise non-controversial human trafficking bill, which was passed earlier today. All right, folks, it's time for the latest lawsuits across America.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Thank you as always, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated and come to order. Lawsuits Across America is now in session. First item on the docket. A federal judge last week granted a request by owners of Wrigley rooftop businesses to withdraw their lawsuit against the city of Chicago and its Landmarks Commission, which sought to throw out the panel's decision allowing the Cubs to install its outfield signs. The businesses, according to the Chicago Tribune, Skybox on Sheffield and Lakeview Baseball Club, did not give any reason for their voluntary dismissal, according to court records. U.S. District Judge Amy St. Eve granted the request. The complaint was filed in Cook County several weeks after the commission's July decision before being moved to federal court. The suit, originally brought by owners of 8 rooftop businesses who feared that signs and large-scale video boards, part of the team's $375 million renovation, would block their bird's-eye views into Wrigley Field. An attorney for those 8 businesses, Tom Moore, declined to comment this week about the dismissal. And a woman of Arab and Jewish descent. Oh, no. Arab descent. Yoo-hoo, Mr. Arab!
Uh-oh.
As Bugs Bunny would
say. He's gone Captain Ahab on Lawsuits Across America. Hide the children, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, please. That woman was strip-searched at a Detroit area airport and has reached a settlement in a lawsuit filed on her behalf, according to the ACLU today. The federal government will give Shoshana Hebshi $40,000 as compensation for being humiliated on the 10th anniversary of 9/11 after armed agents forced her from a plane at Detroit Metropolitan Airport, made her undress during a search and held for hours. Frontier Airlines, the TSA, and Wayne County Airport Authority were named in the federal court lawsuit. Hebshi, who has a Jewish mother and a Saudi father, has said she was ethnically profiled based on her dark complexion. Hebshi of Sylvania, Ohio, was traveling home after visiting a sister in California when she was removed from the Frontier Airlines flight after it landed September 11, 2011. She was seated next to 2 Indian-American men whom crew members had said spent a lot of time in the plane's bathroom. All 3 were detained, according to the ACLU. Hebshi was held for hours before being released, and the 2 men were also released. Yeah, at least that's over, but gotta love it when lawsuits of these kind pop up based on racial profiling. I mean, it always gets hairy. And on that bombshell, I declare today's Lawsuits Across America case dismissed. And now on to business.
Business.
And entertainment. I guess showbiz, you could call it.
Well, he covered himself on that one, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
But
well, we now have
he's playing a full house.
Yes, we got a full house in lawsuit entertainment. We had a full house in lawsuits, so now we got one in entertainment. Quit messing with me, Jay! At any rate, we now have a date for the end of civilized world as we know it, otherwise known as Jon Stewart's last day hosting The Daily Show. The New York Times reports that Stewart, who's hosted The Daily Show for 6 episode on August 6th. Stewart announced the day at the end of Monday night's show. Mr. Stewart, who has hosted The Daily Show since '99, announced in February that he was stepping down. In March, Comedy Central announced Trevor Noah, a 31-year-old South African comedian who's been a contributor on The Daily Show, as the new host. Noah almost immediately came under fire when it was revealed that some of his comedic posts on Twitter had made what some considered hateful remarks about race, Jew, and women. Comedy Central has stood by Noah, however. The New York Times reports that Comedy Central will put The Daily Show on hiatus for the summer after Stewart's last day. The show's relaunch with Noah will be in the fall, but no exact date has been announced. And everywhere you look, there's more Full House. John Stamos revealed on Monday's... Yeah. John Stamos revealed on Monday's Jimmy Kimmel Live that Netflix has officially ordered 13 series, which will kick off with a 1-hour special reuniting the Tanner family. Quote, literally 5 minutes ago they called and they sealed the deal, Stamos said on the ABC late night program. Debuting next year, the newer incarnation of Full House, titled Fuller House, will center on the recently widowed DJ Tanner Fuller, now a veterinarian and expecting her third child. To help care for her two young sons, 12-year-old JD and 7-year-old Max, her younger sister and aspiring musician Stephanie Tanner, and their former neighbor and single Kimmy Gibbler move in to help.
Okay, hold it. Stop the presses, stop that music in the background. So you're saying to me you can confirm that Candace Cameron Bure, who used to play DJ Tanner for the old ABC Full House, will be coming back for the full revamped Netflix version?
Correct!
Wow. Amazing stuff. Please continue.
Right. Anyway, discussions with the other original members of the Full House cast, such as Bob Saget, Lori Loughlin, Mary-Kate and Ashley, and Dave Coulier, are ongoing. Stamos will reprise his role as Uncle Jesse and will also serve as a producer. The announcement comes weeks after word spread that Netflix was eyeing the revival series and 8 months after studio Warner Brothers TV was looking to bring back the beloved TGIF comedy. Back in January of last year, Stamos hinted at a reunion in an interview with Page Six. The San Francisco set Full House, which centered on a widowed father who enlists his best friend Joey Gladstone and his brother-in-law Jesse to help raise his 3 daughters after the death of his wife, lasted 8 seasons from 87 to 95. And of course it was a hit, much like fellow TGIF comedy Boy Meets World, which has since been revived via Disney Channel's Girl Meets World. So it's going to be interesting to see a fuller house than ever before, especially in San Fran, and it's going to be interesting to see how hold on, let me grab my little echo device here. It's going to be interesting to see how global socialism has set in recent years.
Yeah, certainly, and I'm interested to see if the Olsen twins will be making a guest appearance on that program. Obviously, that's not confirmed by me, but I suspect they will be making somewhat of a guest appearance somewhat in the series.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they turned out to be not as good girls as they used to be.
And ladies and gentlemen, I should note on this broadcast that Lori Loughlin will be on the KTLA 5 morning show tomorrow morning with Sam Rubin, so I bet Sam is going to have something to say about this news of a fuller house. With Netflix, we'll see what comes of that, and I'll be watching the morning news tomorrow and see what is said on that, and I'll keep Corey Evan briefed on that and see if anything comes of that, and we'll bring you a full report, if necessary, tomorrow night on the Evan Miller Report.
And maybe even download some audio from it as well.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to do that as well, since we get the the regional feeds here in Los Angeles, here in the newsroom. We'll see what we can do about that for the All right, folks, on that note, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Tuesday, April the 21st, 2015. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You'll be glad you did. For all of us here at SHR Media, we thank you for listening. The weather and the Exceptional Conservative Show are up next.
Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Here's Chris Fox. He has tonight's weather forecast. Good night, everybody.
It's the weather system that just won't go away. A big area of low pressure that's slow moving across Canada that continues to bring an arm of snow across western parts of Ontario. No real changes in the forecast here over the next 24 hours. In fact, we could see another, 10 to maybe 20 centimetres of snow, perhaps 30 towards the shores of the Hudson. So some very snowy weather, and also the winds will be pretty gusty too. A few showers will push across to the northeast of the US, and some severe thunderstorms breaking out later in the afternoon and evening time across the likes of Texas, Oklahoma, and maybe Arkansas, Louisiana overnight too. The Pacific Northwest should see a window of fine weather from parts of British Columbia down through Washington and Oregon. A little bit more in the way of sunshine than we've seen poking through the clouds over recent days, but still pretty cloudy towards coastal parts of California. Heavy downpours continue to affect the far south of Miami, but through the Florida Panhandle, the weather's dry and warm with temperatures into the low 80s. Some warm sunshine stretching across into North and South Carolina, but working a little bit further northwards, Washington, D.C. and New York are likely to be hit by some afternoon downpours. Any showers still around, perhaps New York on Thursday, will clear by Friday, and the weather improves. There'll be more sunshine. It will start to feel a tad warmer as well. But meanwhile, across the Pacific Northwest, the weather turning much more unsettled with showers.